The career of one James Rolfe, otherwise known as the Angry Video Game Nerd, is one of the best examples of the butterfly effect in motion that I can cite. All it took was some small, seemingly innocuous videos of a post-grad making short films by tinkering with retro games to define one of the staple genres of YouTube for decades to come, laying a groundwork that dozens, maybe even hundreds of creators would build their careers upon in the 20 plus years, I repeat, 20 plus years since James first uploaded back in 2004. For whatever feelings one may have on the man, it can't be denied that James has left a long, indelible mark upon the online landscape and can be cited as one of the first true examples of a YouTuber, or content creator, whichever you prefer. I myself grew up watching James, not just through the Angry Video Game Nerd, or AVGN as I'll call it for the rest of this video since damn, that name's a mouthful, but his Halloween special Monster Madness, where he discussed various horror films, his board game review show slash existential horror series, Board James, because where else do you go with a board game review show other than the unimaginable terror of repeatedly dying across time and space in a never-ending loop of tabletop entertainment-inspired suffering? Duh. And even just catching videos about his general thoughts and feelings on whatever media he felt like discussing at the time. While I stopped watching regularly around 2014 or 2015, shortly after the movie release, I find myself crediting James Rolfe and the AVGN with helping me discover a lot about the hobbies and passions I have today, honestly. So I can't help but occasionally check in and see just what James is up to nowadays, especially whenever a big multimedia project pops up like with today's subject, AVGN 8-Bit, a love letter to both the days of NES classics like Mega Man, and the AVGN's now 21-year-long chronicle of surprisingly convoluted, I don't know, lore, story, overly elaborate in-jokes. I'm unsure what to categorize AVGN's history as, but whatever it is, this game loves it. Directed by Justin Silverman and Joe Lascola, I'm so sorry if I mispronounced that, and developed by Programmancer Games, AVGN 8-Bit is chock full of references and Easter eggs that will undoubtedly elicit a chuckle from James's most devoted fans. Not to mention, it takes more than a few gameplay views from both the best and worst of the NES's extensive library, making a game that feels so at home on the 80s console that the developers even went ahead and worked with Mega Cat Studios to put the game on a proper NES cartridge, though as of writing that version hasn't been released, nor have the modern console versions. This is strictly a review of the initial Steam release. It's clear that there's a lot of love and reverence poured into this particular release, not just for the AVGN specifically, but for retro gaming in general. With all that said, however, influence from NES titles and references to web series do not constitute a good game all their own. So, I'd like to ask, is this game truly a diamond in the rough, or in this case an untarnished corn kernel in a swirl of shit, or is this just another piece of digital diarrhea that the nerd himself would slide onto his stage only to demolish in some dramatic fashion? Well, join me as we crank up the noise and critique AVGN 8-Bit. It's time to head back to the past of like a week and a half at time of writing. I mean, counts as the past, so works for me. Starting off, the presentation is, oh, hello there, Mr. Rolfe. Yeah, most of the game's cutscenes are these full-motion videos in the style of a typical AVGN episode. While I have to admit that they did catch me off guard at first, they are a really fun way to present the story. Sure, the acting's a bit hokey, but hey, with the nerd, that's honestly part of the charm. And all these years later, James's performance still carries the right mix of incredulousness and aggressiveness to make his anger towards these games and the events that transpire around him feel genuine, no matter how exaggerated it gets. The special effects also hit that right mix of being legitimately impressive at times, while still remaining shoddy enough that you could imagine them in some low-budget FMV game from the 90s. The possessed NES prop is my favorite touch, and I'd be lying if I said the montage of various nerd episodes throughout the years didn't tickle the nostalgia bone just a little. Krank is not immune to propaganda. That's how the line goes, right? If I had to find any issue with these cutscenes, it's the fact that the game hits you with a surprisingly long one right out of the gate. One of the first things the game shows you is a 6-minute long FMV that sets up the initial plot, and by the end of it, I found myself getting just a tad impatient to start the damn game already. Sure, you can skip it, so it's not too big of a deal, and at that length, you're basically getting a mini episode of the show along with the game. Plus, you can just turn off the FMV cutscenes entirely in the menu. But as every older relative will tell you before a job interview, first impressions are everything, and the game just dumping a bunch of background on you feels like the clunkiest way to get the story across, to the point where I end up just skipping the opening cutscene every time and not bothering with the story after my first playthrough. If I had to guess the developers' intentions, I would assume that they just wanted to get all of this story out of the way immediately so that the rest of the game could focus almost entirely on the gameplay, which is understandable and true to the NES era inspired aspirations, I suppose, but I can't help but feel the story could have been presented a tad more elegantly over the course of the game. There are more FMV cutscenes that crop up after you beat a certain amount of levels, but they don't do much other than tell you how much of the game you have left, something that's already apparent from the fucking stage select screen, and as such, makes these scenes feel utterly useless. Surely it would have been better to have these cutscenes contain more of the story, so that the game didn't have to pile it all into the beginning and end. It's not a huge drawback, and obviously other games have had much longer opening cutscenes, but it's something I couldn't help but notice. As for the story itself, well, it's fairly simple. Longtime supporting character, Super Mecha Death Christ 2000 BC 4.1 Beta, possesses a nerd's NES and uses it to infect every video game console in the world, effectively bricking them. I guess Death Christ looked at where the console market is heading and just wants everyone to make the jump to PC already. Regardless, the nerd takes offense to this, grabs 6 of the most vile games imaginable, each with their labels conspicuously torn off or obscured so no likeness rights need to be paid out. Funny how that works, and a cup of his own liquid shit, pours it onto a pentagram, and creates the very game in which we are playing now. It's all very tongue-in-cheek and purposely absurd, to the point where it almost feels counterintuitive to try critiquing it. Not as if that'll stop me from trying, though. None of this makes a lick of sense to anybody who doesn't already know the nerd's, for lack of a better word, mythology. I mean, the nerd stops to explain that Death Christ was built by cavemen, restored by both Nazis and the US government, guess they rolled over the work on him into Operation Paperclip, and at one point even helped the nerd defeat Satan, and I just thought, imagine being a newcomer to this series. This information would be like getting slapped in the face with the third volume of Lord of the Rings with half the pages torn out. It's certainly fun for me as someone who's watched the nerd for the better part of a decade and could follow this no trouble, but for any new folks in the audience, good fucking luck making sense of any of this.
Oh, but it's not for new folks, Krank. This is a love letter to the fans.
I know that, but if that love letter is a piece of individually sold media in its own right, then you've got to make the assumption that at least a few newcomers are gonna pick it up. Plus, every series has got to make an effort at courting new fans at some point down the line. Spend too much time nostalgically navel-gazing and you get something akin to the newest Ghostbusters films, with an increasingly aging legacy cast who look as if they're just praying for the sweet embrace of death before they're inevitably called in to do another one. Perhaps an option on the menu with some bios to read might have helped catch newcomers up to speed. Hell, structure it like an NES game manual to keep on theme, but give some avenue for people to catch up, other than a few lines of exposition over stock footage. Not asking for an oral report or anything, just something to decide that people can use to better inform themselves outside of watching 226 episodes of a web show and its accompanying movie. Still, for what it's worth, the story is charming in its silliness, and if you're someone who's already fond of the nerd, even nostalgic for him like I am, then you'll probably find these FMV cutscenes worming their way into your heart. The tone and production design feel right at home with some of the best episodes of the web series, and on a personal note, FMV cutscenes are something I just find to be a fun novelty, so these little snippets were a pleasant surprise, if nothing else. The story is also conveyed in these little pixelated cutscenes that play before each level, but these are less proper story beats and more just silly little jokes that play into the theme of the level. The ET parody establishes we are actually crawling up ETs, or rather TP's, colon while he anally probes himself, for instance. They're good fun and fit right into the nerd's charmingly puerile sense of humor. The sprite work for these cutscenes is particularly expressive to the point where I found myself continually impressed at just how much character was squeezed into these little 8-bit sprites. In fact, the game itself just looks gorgeous in every aspect. The 8-bit graphics and vibrant color palettes are the textbook definition of beauty and simplicity. Even when the screen is flooded with enemies and obstacles, the heavy line work and detailed animation on each sprite means that everything on the screen remains visibly and readably clear, even during the most hectic moments of gameplay. Speaking of which... The core gameplay is essentially structured like Mega Man 1. You have 6 bosses to defeat and you can tackle them in any order you choose. Each of the levels and their respective bosses are again references to both the AVGN's past and wider pop culture, with characters such as E.T., Uncle Fester, and Pepsi Man all being remixed and turned into original villains for the nerd to beat. Their levels play fairly similarly to Mega Man as well, with the nerd jumping, shooting, and sliding his way to victory. The gameplay doesn't reinvent the wheel or anything, but it's a damn good 2D platformer, and there are a few twists thrown in there to offer something unique. Probably the biggest spin on the gameplay is the gunpowder bar. You see, your default weapon is fairly weak. It'll get the job done, but you'll be plugging away at enemies with your weapon for a good minute or two before they die. If you want some real firepower, or gunpowder in this case, then you gotta collect these little power-ups to make your weapon stronger and change the pattern of your projectiles. But there's a catch. When you get hit, you lose some gunpowder and you only have a second or two to recollect it. The power essentially works like Sonic's rings. Easy to get, but hard to keep unless you play very skillfully. You can also get a variety of sub-weapons, which, on a side note, I love that you have an option to use your sub-weapon with up plus the attack button, just like classic Castlevania. That's a fun touch I couldn't help but appreciate. Anyways, the sub-weapons range from beer bottles, reoccurring character shit pickle, a brown brick. You see what they did there? And you even get a golden shit pickle if you end up on your last life. We'll get back to this little feisty-faced fucker in a second. These sub-weapons are pretty damn helpful, and you really gotta learn where to find them and how to use them, especially if you want to keep your gunpowder. Some of the toughest enemies in the games become so much easier to deal with if you have the right sub-weapon on you. My personal favorite is this little red face. It makes the nerd so fucking angry that he becomes temporarily invincible and barrels through enemies. If that's not core to the nerd's character, then I don't know what is. Man's weaponizing his anger so much he deserves a red lantern ring. Only problem, one of these weapons in particular is just a little bit too powerful, and I'm talking about the golden shit pickle. So much so that it overshadows any other option you can find. I get that it's meant to help a struggling player, but fuck mothering mothballs, it just destroys bosses. Even the final boss is almost trivial with this little bastard by your side. By the end of the game, I was just purposely dying until I hit my last life, then coasting on this crap covered cucumber for the rest of it. Not that you'll need help dying, because this game is so fucking hard, it's brutal, even right off the bat. This leaves the difficulty as this bizarre pendulum swinging back and forth. Way too hard one moment, then way too easy once you get the golden shit pickle. Now, it's worth noting that the game has multiple difficulty levels, including an easy mode, which I honestly recommend picking for your first time, because on normal, the game kicks your ass so hard that even getting past one level feels like pushing a boulder up a mountain. And it doesn't help that with the game aping Mega Man 1 in structure, every level, aside from the final one, is accessible from the jump rather than following each other in a linear progression where the difficulty can ramp up over time. They're all hard as fucking stone from the moment you jump in. No matter which level you pick, there isn't one that really acts as a good entry point or first level, so to speak. Mega Man proper solves this by having an unspoken level order, based off which robot master is weak to each weapon. Take the most recent game, Mega Man 11 for example. Once you know Acid Man is weak to Block Man's weapon, you can reasonably infer that you're meant to do Acid Man's level after Block Man. AVGN 8-bit doesn't really have any equivalent to that, so you sort of just have to keep throwing yourself at a level until you beat one. Admittedly, there is a certain level of satisfaction that comes from beating each of these levels, and if you're looking for a challenge, then the uneven difficulty might even be a bonus for you, but I do wish the game did a better job of easing you into proceedings. As it is now, the game just throws you to the fucking wolves, and those wolves are fucking like it's in a Megaverse novel, baby. I'm talking enemies that can drain your entire life bar in 2 or 3 hits, insta-kill spikes, bottomless pits, tricky jumps, and every variety of bullshit hardship a 2D platformer can throw at you. This game ain't fucking around, so I get why the devs felt the need to add a helping hand when you're on your last leg, but surely there could have been a better alternative. Maybe shuffling around difficulty mode so that easy is called normal and normal is called hard might have helped. Make the current hard mode extra hard or something along those lines if you must, but Golden Shit Pickle feels like an admission from the devs that the difficulty is a tad out of whack and that this is their best attempt to stick a band-aid on the problem. That's not to say I'm against such items existing in games. I personally don't think there's anything wrong with giving a helping hand to a struggling player, but when it shifts difficulty so far in the other direction to make most enemies, bosses, or challenges trivially easy, even just grabbing you from pits if you fall into them, then it feels like a bit of an overcorrection to me. The difficulty might also be a way to artificially increase the length of the game since it's fairly short otherwise. Once you beat the 6 main levels, you get one more final stage, then that's it. Even after dying so many times, I managed to beat the main game in only 3.5 hours, and I got most of the achievements while doing it. There is a hard mode and a secret boss rush if you want to squeeze a little more time out of it, but those will only net you an extra 2 or 3 hours at best. For $20, that's not too bad or anything, especially when you consider this game will need to fit on an actual NES cartridge, but I do wish there was a little more to sink your teeth into, like maybe a challenge mode with remixed levels, or some sort of secret bonus level might have been a nice extra to work through after you beat the main game. What makes the price an even bigger sticking point in my mind is the fact that 8-bit's predecessors, the AVGN Adventure games, are available in a bundle for half the price of AVGN 8-bit. Both the AVGN Adventure games individually are longer, have optional extras you can collect, collect, like more playable characters or permanent items to make the nerd more powerful, and the collection even comes with a bonus group of levels at the end added specifically for that version. Now, it's worth noting that those games have been out for a couple of years. The first AVGN Adventures was released all the way back in 2013, and if Steam database is to be believed, both games launched at $15 a pop, only to slowly go down in price over time. So in that regard, if you adjust for inflation, 8-Bit's launch price is roughly in line with the other titles. But on the other hand, that context doesn't change the fact that you can get 2 longer, arguably better titles centered around the nerd for half the price, so perhaps it might be best to wait on this one and see if it also drops in price over time. Still, with all that said, I can't deny I enjoy a more succinct game from time to time. Don't get me wrong, a game being dozens if not hundreds of hours long is great if you want bang for your buck, but on occasion I find it nice to have a game I can just get into, beat, and put down over the course of a few hours, especially if life gets busy and I don't have as much free time as I'd like. Overall, while I think this game might have been better served being $15 or even $10, there's a reasonable amount of game you get for what you're paying for at $20. It's no Silksong or anything, but it's worth the asking price in my opinion. But if you're on the fence about this one, maybe keep an eye on it and see if it gets cheaper like the other games. AVGN 8-Bit is a damn good time if you're in the mood for a 2D platformer. Sure, you're gonna need to be already a fan of the nerd to truly understand every little joke and nudge the game is throwing at you, but if you don't care about that or even the story, and just want something quick to play over the weekend, then this is far from your worst option. A wobbly difficulty curve and a short runtime don't stop AVGN 8-Bit from being a funny, challenging romp through 6 of the strangest levels you'll ever see in a video game. If you got $20, you're looking to spend it on a game, and you're looking to go back to the past, then I highly recommend picking this one up. Maybe put on a few episodes of AVGN in the background and get yourself caught up to speed though. Well, that's all folks. See you later. Have a happy holiday season, whether you be spending it with friends, family, or clones of yourself creative via your own shit. And always remember to crank up the noise. I know it's been a rough year, but hey, we're gonna get through it together, and we're all gonna do the best we can. Not for the past, but for the present and the future as well.